There are certain things that define our modern world, concepts and technologies that have become so ingrained in our popular consciousness that we often fail to notice them, despite the nearly continual use that they receive. Items such as computers, satellite communications, and international air travel all fall into this category. And then there are automobiles. The creation of his mass production concept nearly a century ago, Henry Ford unleashed a revolution the likes of which the world has never seen, neither before nor since. Never before had ordinary people been presented with the prospect of such unfettered freedom, the ability to go where they wanted, when they wanted. It was a concept that dovetailed almost perfectly with the American philosophy of personal freedom. The nation was on wheels, and it was never looking back. But such was not always the case. In an era before Detroit reigned supreme, there existed a world where life moved more sedately. Travel was relatively rare, and long-range travel was even rarer still. Indeed, it was not uncommon for individuals to be born and die in the same home, and during the entire interim, not stray more than 10 miles from that point. It was a static society, living with roots firmly planted in the soil, and on the rare occasions when long-distance travel did become necessary, there was only one viable option: the train. This was the age of the iron horse, when magnificent machines roamed the landscape, flashing brass and spitting steam, and inspiring awe in all those who crossed their paths. They were the masters of the land, conquering vast distances with seeming ease, and achieving levels of speed and efficiency that had been unimaginable up until that point in time. And then, with the turn of a key and the revving of an engine, the era was over. The age of the great steam-spitting, fire-breathing beasts was at an end, their prominence ripped from their grasp by concrete and gasoline, their whimsical hissing and chuffing giving way to the hiss of air brakes and the docile humming of a diesel engine block. But even today, more than a half-century after the last mainline steam locomotive chugged its way into the sunset, faint traces remain. Like faded memories in a long-forgotten hope chest, weather-worn remnants still dot the landscape, biding their time, waiting to be rediscovered so that they might once again tell their story. This is the story of just such a remnant, a faint trace across the heart of the California gold country, unknown to many, unnoticed by nearly all, but carrying with it the story of a railroad that defied the odds and defined an era. There are many places where our story could begin, but perhaps the best place is with one man in particular. This man, Mr. Thomas S. Bullock. A native of New England, Bullock was an ambitious entrepreneur in the truest spirit of the Victorian era. Known for promoting business interests throughout America, Mexico, and Europe, he made his first break into the railroad business when he spearheaded construction of a 77-mile line between Prescott and Seligman, Arizona. The name of this scrappy short line? The Prescott and Arizona Central Railroad. Designed to serve the booming copper mines of central Arizona, the P&AC quickly disappointed its backers, suffering from many deficiencies in both its conception and its construction. Grades too steep, locomotives too weak, and seemingly perpetual washouts plagued the fledgling company. And all the while, pressure was mounting from a new competitor, the Santa Fe, Prescott, and Phoenix Railway. 3 years prior, brothers Frank and Nathan Murphy had been strong-armed out of their position in the PNAC by Bullock. But now they took their revenge, as the SFP&P proved to be the better operation. Local businesses were soon wooed by the upstart's superior performance, and profits for the PNAC tanked. In 1895, beset by dual forces of competition and inadequate planning, the PNAC pulled into the roundhouse for the last time. But as a man, Bullock was nothing if not resilient. Undaunted by his failure, he resolved to learn from his mistakes, packed up whatever pieces of his company that he could, and headed for California, determined to yet make a name for himself in the railroad industry. And so Bullock came to the town of Oakdale, a sleepy collection of cattle ranches nestled at the base of the Sierra Nevada foothills. Here, Bullock hoped to establish a connection with the Southern Pacific Railroad and build his own line eastward to the rich mineral deposits and vast old-growth forests of the high Sierras.
But building a railroad is no small task, and if Bullock was ever going to get his project off the ground, he was going to need three things: money, money, and money. More succinctly, he needed investors. And if you were going to tap capital investment markets in pre-turn-of-the-century California, there was only one place to go.
I'm going home to my city by the bay.
And so Bullock paid a visit to San Francisco, hoping to make friends and rub elbows with the city's social and financial elite. He quickly found a sympathetic ear in the form of William H. Crocker. One of the city's top bank executives, Crocker was no stranger to the railroad business. His father, after all, had been Charles Crocker, one of the so-called Big Four who had built the mighty Central Pacific Railroad in the 1860s. This left young William in the unique position of having both inside knowledge and the bankroll to back it up. And Crocker brought far more to the table than just his family legacy. Among his many business associates was a Polish nobleman by the name of Andrzej Poniatowski. Prince Poniatowski, as he was known, had come to the United States with the intention of investing the sizable fortunes of himself and other European nobility. Bullock talked a good game, and it wasn't long before the prince was on board. The resulting three-way marriage was an odd combination of East Coast ambition, West Coast savvy, and European aristocracy, and it would soon be making waves as the dream of a railroad through the Sierras became reality. In April of 1897, ground was broken in Oakdale, and the rails quickly progressed through Occidental, Paul Cell, and Cooperstown. By autumn, the mining town of Chinese Camp had been reached, and on November 8th of 1897, a ceremonial gold spike was driven in the town of Jamestown, marking the completion of the railroad's first section.
The collapse of placer mining in the 1860s hit this area hard. But by the 1890s, the local economy had transitioned to deep rock industrial mining, and the economy experienced a renaissance of sorts. By the time of the railroad's arrival, local papers reported Jamestown as being the rip-snortinest, most blankety-blank, altogether roughest town in the mines. High praise indeed, even given the journalistic hyperbole of the era. Jamestown was alive and kicking, and the railroad only promised more of the same.
Business was brisk for the new railroad, and construction was soon started on a new complex of facilities, including shops, a roundhouse, freight shed, depot, and general offices. Furthermore, through the efforts of a new investor, a three-story hotel was soon under construction, just a few paces from the quickly emerging depot. One of the Mother Lode's more successful businessmen, W.A. Nevels, had made his fortune in the mining and freight hauling industries. By the time of the railroad's arrival, he owned wagon and stage lines and several local mines, including the expansive Rawhide Mine, just across the summit of Table Mountain from Jamestown. The Hotel Neville's was the very definition of opulence, featuring such amenities as marble floors, quartzite columns, a mirror-paneled dining room, and a hand-carved mahogany bar imported from Europe. It was the first building in Tuolumne County to be equipped with electricity, leading one reporter with the Oakdale Leader to write, "Jimtown is noisy, whistles blow night and day, cowbells ring, the milkman shouts milk loud enough to be heard on the north branch of the South Fork of the Tuolumne. And a lot of roosters think it's broad daylight because the Hotel Neville's is ablaze with electric lights." But Bullock was by no means done. The main line to Jamestown was only his opening move in this grand chess game, and experience had been a harsh teacher. From his trials in Arizona, he had learned the value of a competent engineer, and he now moved quickly to secure the services of just such a person. He found his man in the form of William Hamilton Newell. Born in New Jersey, Newell had earned a degree in civil engineering from the University of Michigan in 1885. Continuing his move west, the newly minted Wolverine was soon making a name for himself with the Mexican Central Railway, engineering their breathtaking line over the Tampico-Yetes mountain range. Following his efforts south of the border, he began work on the Stockton Terminal and Eastern Railroad, and was laboring in the small town of Linden when Tom Bullock came calling. Bullock wasted little time in retaining Newell's services, and soon put him to work rerouting a troublesome section of the Sierra's main line. Following this realignment project, Newell was soon working on what was by far the fledgling railroad's most ambitious project to date, the line to the city of Angels Camp.
I would give the world to see.
As one of the most prosperous and productive mining towns in the region, Angels Camp was a logical objective for the Sierra Railway. Mines such as the Stickle, Lightner, Utica, and Gold Cliff had long since become legendary for the quality of ore they produced, and stamp mills operated almost continuously in this mountain hamlet, creating a dreadful racket that was music to the ears of railroad executives. The promise of profit from transporting such riches was a businessman's dream come true.
Angels Camp today is a modern community, snugly nestled in the folds of the Central California foothills, but reminders of its wild, rags-to-riches roots are still visible today. A walk down Main Street behind me is like a walk through the decades, evidence of the town's long and proud history, written in brick and mortar.
But at the turn of the last century, despite all of its prominence and success, the city of Angels was still an isolated mountain town. Travel from the valley below could take days, forcing travelers to brave narrow, treacherous, bone-jarring roads that were choked with dust in the summer and muddy quagmires in the winter. People needed a better way to get around. And so in the spring of 1898, work crews began grading from the north end of the Jamestown rail yard, crossing 5th Street and gradually descending toward the downtown district. Clearing crews cut brush and trees, while horse teams trailing Fresno scrapers followed close behind. 2 blocks from the yard, the tracks crossed Willow Road and executed a descending left-hand curve, heading for the city limits.
Today, this is what's left of the path they cut. A nearly invisible trace hidden amongst the undergrowth. But back in the 1890s, this was important ground for the Sierra. Immediately to my right, your left, is the Union Oil distributorship, which was served by a short spur track. It's still in operation today, but under different ownership. Immediately behind that, a few dozen yards, across Willow Street, was the Union Ice Company. And across the tracks from that, a small warehouse was served by another short spur. To the builders of the railroad, this meant one thing: revenue. The Angel Branch was now officially a for-profit operation, and the railroad's builders wanted more.
Exiting the curve and rolling onto the flatlands along the north end of town, The tracks crossed Main Street and promptly began their assault on the first natural obstacle to stand in their path, Woods Creek. Peaceful and serene, this is one of the most important watercourses in Tuolumne County, for it was along the banks of this creek in June of 1848 that a prospecting party led by James Woods discovered gold. Coming less than 6 months after James Marshall's famous discovery at Sutter's Mill, this confirmed that the Sutter Nugget was not a fluke, and that there truly was gold in them thar hills. It was perhaps this event more than any other that ultimately set the great California gold rush in motion. Pushing northward from the creek, the tracks traversed John Black's dairy ranch before ascending the east face of Table Mountain on a wide, swinging S-curve. Grading crews hugged the slope of the mountain, following the course of Peppermint Creek as they steadily gained elevation. The serpentine routing chosen by Newell did its job, as gradients were kept to a manageable level during this phase of construction. Soon, grading crews were pushing closer to their objective, a low point in the ridge that would allow the easiest transit of the summit.
Table Mountain is a geological curiosity of sorts. It's the result of a lava flow that originated in the Mono Lake region around 3.5 to 4 million years ago, give or take a millennium. The lava, as fluids are often wont to do, opted to follow the path of least resistance and settled into the original course of the Stanislaus River. Now this formed a basaltic capstone of sorts, effectively shielding the material beneath it from nasty forces such as erosion and the like. This meant that over the ensuing eons, as the surrounding landscape was slowly worn down, the rocks and soil beneath this flow were protected, leaving what was once the lowest point in the region as one of the highest. It's what geologists often call inverted topography, and it's the reason that Table Mountain is often referred to as a river turned inside out. But of course none of this mattered to Sierra. They didn't really care how this thing got here. All they cared is that it was there, and it was in their way. And so in the summer of 1898, with picks and shovels and wheelbarrows, and a quantity of blasting powder that could only be described as scary beyond all reason, a small army of men set to work against the mountain. In some of the more difficult areas, pneumatic machine drills were used, marking a first for this type of construction. The work was slow, backbreaking, and dangerous. But within a few months' time, it was done. And this is what they created. An S-shaped trench hewn through solid basalt, 40 feet deep, beneath the surface of Stone River.
With the conquest of Table Mountain now complete, the pace of construction picked up once again. The tracks hugged the side of the mountain as they steadily dropped on a gentle 2% grade toward the floor of the Rawhide Valley below. A wide, flat plain nestled between neighboring mountain ridges, the Rawhide Valley was one of the richest areas of Tuolumne County at the time. Home to the expansive Rawhide Mine and its 40-stamp mill, its importance to the local economy of the era cannot be overstated. Continuing northward, it took nearly a mile before the railroad had forfeited enough elevation to turn its back to the mountain and drive toward the mines of Calaveras County. At this point, the track made a curious split, with the main track curving left off of the mountain, while a secondary track continued straight for a short distance before ending. This would become a station known as Marble Spur, and would be a major source of revenue for the young company. Here, slabs of rough-hewn marble would be brought from Prince Poniatowski's quarry near Columbia and transloaded onto rail cars. This was a major objective for the Sierra Railway in its formative years, with routes via Sonora and Tuttletown having been previously proposed. With the tracks now complete to Marble Spur and the mines of the Rawhide Valley, the still incomplete Angels Branch was nonetheless a major revenue-producing operation. Trains hauling precious ore and fine stone now rumbled over Table Mountain and into the Jamestown yards on a daily basis, and the railroad soon found itself struggling to find the means of moving such heavy loads across such steep grades and sharp curves.